The $20,000 threshold. The number that changes everything about how you think. There is a specific number where your relationship with money changes completely. Not $1 million, not six figures, not the amount your parents told you to have before you felt grown up. A number far smaller than any of those, and far more powerful in practice than any of them, at least at first. That number is $20,000, and most people have no idea it exists. What most financial advice gets wrong. When people talk about building wealth, they tend to describe it as a long, linear climb. You save more, you invest more, you earn more, you repeat until you arrive somewhere comfortable. The implication is that the journey is mostly the same from beginning to end, just a matter of time and consistency. That is not how it actually works. There are thresholds in the wealth-building journey where the rules change, where the effort required to reach the next milestone starts to shrink, where the psychological experience of handling money shifts from scarcity to strategy, where your brain stops working against you and starts working for you. $20,000 is the first of those thresholds. It is not the finish line. It is not even close. But it is the moment when the boulder you have been pushing uphill reaches the crest, and gravity starts helping instead of resisting. Everything before it feels like pushing against the world. Everything after it feels like the world is beginning to push with you. A survival mode problem when you do not have money saved. Your brain operates in a state psychologists describe as survival mode. Every financial decision gets filtered through fear and scarcity rather than opportunity and growth. You take the first job offer that comes along, even when it is clearly wrong for you, because you cannot afford to be selective. You stay in situations you actively dislike, because leaving feels too dangerous. You agree to things you do not want to do because you need the income. You make short-term decisions that make the long-term harder, because the short-term is the only thing that feels real. This is not a character flaw. It is a cognitive state. When your brain is in survival mode, it cannot simultaneously evaluate long-term opportunity. It is not equipped to do both at once. Trying to think about wealth building while financially terrified is like trying to plan a vacation while your house is on fire. The immediate threat consumes all available bandwidth. Research on financial psychology consistently confirms this. Having as little as $2,000 in emergency savings produces a measurable increase in financial well-being, not just because of the money itself, but because of the psychological shift it creates. A small buffer begins to move the brain out of pure reaction and into something approaching agency. When you build that buffer to 3 to 6 months of living expenses, which for most households lands somewhere around $20,000, the psychological shift deepens significantly. You are no longer managing crises after crises. You are beginning to manage a financial life. The mathematics of the threshold here is what the numbers look like in practice. Assume you are saving $1,000 per month and earning 8% annually on your investments. Getting from zero to your first $20,000 takes approximately 19 months. That is a year and a half of genuine discipline, tracking your spending, saying no to things you want, resisting the pull of every financial impulse. Not easy, and most people do not complete it. The attrition rate on financial goals in that first year is substantial. Your second $20,000 does not take another 19 months. It takes approximately 17. Your first $20,000 is now working alongside your monthly contributions, generating its own returns, reducing the amount of time your labor alone needs to carry the load. You did the same work, saved the same amount per month, took the same investment approach, and the timeline shrank by 2 months. By your third $20,000, it shrinks further. By your fourth, further still. The acceleration is not dramatic in the early stages. It feels slow. And that is one of the reasons people give up before they experience it. But the direction of the effect never reverses. The more capital working for you, the less time each subsequent milestone requires. By the time your portfolio reaches $400,000, 8% annual returns generate your next $20,000 in approximately 5 months, automatically, without any additional contribution from you. The milestone that once required 19 months of discipline now arrives on its own in 5. The math did not change. The scale did. Why the amount matters more than the strategy here is the insight most financial content obscures. Usually because it is not exciting enough to build a business around. The investment strategy available to someone with $20,000 is functionally identical to the strategy available to someone with $2,000. The same index funds, the same brokerages, the same basic principles of diversification, low fees, and long holding periods. There is no secret instrument that unlocks at $20,000. What changes is scale, and scale transforms percentage returns into amounts that register as meaningful. A 10% annual return on $2,000 is $200. That is real, but it does not change anything about your daily life. A 10% annual return on $20,000 is $2,000. That is a month's savings arriving on its own, without any additional work from you. At $20,000 invested, 8% annual growth produces approximately $1,600 per year, income you did not earn through labor, arriving because your existing capital was generating returns. That amount is not enough to retire on, but it is enough to start feeling like money works differently than it did before. This is not a theory about motivation. It is arithmetic applied to human psychology. When the amounts feel relevant to your actual life, the behavior required to maintain and grow them becomes easier to sustain. The identity shift nobody talks about. Here's the part of the $20,000 milestone that most financial content ignores, because it is harder to quantify and does not fit neatly into a calculator. Saving $20,000 from zero, for most people, requires sustained discipline over 1 to 2 years. To get there, you have had to track spending, resist impulse purchases, and prioritize future benefit over present comfort, consistently, not occasionally, but as a default. That process changes who you are, not just what you have. You prove to yourself that you can control money instead of being controlled by it. You demonstrated to yourself, through behavior rather than intention, that you are the kind of person who follows through on a financial commitment over a long period. That is not a small thing. Most people never do it. This identity shift affects every financial decision that follows. Before $20,000, the question about the $4 coffee was a genuine financial anxiety. After $20,000, you have demonstrated that you can make the large sacrifices when they matter, which means the small ones lose their weight. You are no longer sweating the minor expenses because you have proved you understand the major ones. More importantly, your relationship with risk changes. Before $20,000, unexpected expenses were emergencies. The car needed repairs. That was a financial crisis. The laptop died. That was a financial crisis. Rent increased. That was a financial crisis. Every setback consumed the mental energy you needed for everything else. After $20,000, these events become inconveniences. Is still unpleasant, but not structurally threatening. And something shifts in how you read your environment. Opportunities that were always present but invisible to a survival mode brain start becoming visible. A colleague mentions a business idea looking for early involvement. Before, you would have nodded and moved on. Now you can consider it. A below-market rental property appears that needs work. Before, you would have scrolled past it. Now you can run the numbers. A professional development opportunity arises that the employer will not fund. Before, it felt impossible. Now you can evaluate the return. This is what the phrase, money goes to money, actually means. It is not a cosmic preference for the already wealthy. It is that capital provides options, and options create the conditions for more capital. Having $20,000 does not guarantee that you will seize any of these opportunities, but not having it guarantees you cannot. Walking away money and what it does to your career. One of the least discussed effects of reaching $20,000 in savings is what it does to your professional life. When you are living paycheck to paycheck, you are, in a practical sense, trapped in whatever employment situation you currently occupy. Your employer could be treating you poorly. The work could be genuinely wrong for you. The environment could be actively damaging, but you cannot leave, because leaving requires surviving a period without income, and you have no buffer for that. This creates a negotiating position of near zero leverage. You cannot ask for what you are worth, because the cost of being told no feels too high. You cannot push back on unreasonable requests, because you need the position more than the position needs you. You cannot explore alternatives because the risk of being between situations feels catastrophic. $20,000 changes this dynamic, not because you plan to quit immediately, but because you could. And the knowledge that you could changes how you carry yourself, how you respond to pressure, how you evaluate your options. You negotiate differently when the worst case is temporarily uncomfortable rather than immediately devastating. You perform differently when you are not operating under quiet desperation. People notice this shift. Managers notice this shift. The confidence that comes from genuine optionality reads in how you engage with work, and it tends to produce better assignments, better treatment, and eventually better compensation. The $20,000 you used as a professional backstop often returns far more than its face value through career trajectory changes alone. The opportunity cost mindset. Once you have $20,000 in savings and investments, you start evaluating major purchases differently, not because you become a miser, but because you have developed an intuitive sense of what money can become when it compounds. That $30,000 car is not just $30,000, it is $30,000 that, invested at reasonable market returns over 20 years, becomes something closer to $140,000 to $200,000. The decision to buy it is not wrong in every circumstance, but it is no longer invisible. You see what you are actually trading? This does not mean optimizing every purchase into misery. It means becoming intentional rather than reactive. Most people make their largest financial decisions based on what they can afford monthly, rather than what the decision costs in opportunity. That frame, affordable payment versus real cost, is one of the most expensive mental errors in personal finance. Once you cross the $20,000 threshold and begin experiencing compound returns as a real, tangible thing in your own account, that frame tends to change. Not because you became a different person, but because you now have direct experience of what compounding actually feels like at a scale that matters. The most important warning: most people who reach $20,000 for the first time make the same mistake. They treat it as a reward. They buy something they have been wanting. They take the trip they deferred. They upgrade the car. They use it as a down payment on a house they cannot actually sustain. The logic is that they earned this through discipline, and now it is time to enjoy it. That $20,000 is not a reward. It is a foundation. It is the seed capital that, left alone to compound, becomes the engine of everything that follows. Spending it restores you to the psychological and mathematical state you were in before you built it. Survival mode, linear growth, no buffer, no leverage. Build it once, protect it, then let the mathematics of compounding do what no amount of discipline alone can do. Grow wealth that accelerates as it grows, creates options as it compounds, and eventually operates entirely independently of how hard you are willing to work on any given day. The focus shift. Stop sweating small decisions. There is a pattern in how people think about money that tends to invert itself once the $20,000 threshold is crossed. Before the threshold, people obsess over small expenses. Should I buy the name brand version or the generic one? Is the $4 coffee worth it if I make it at home for 50 cents? Should I pay for the parking or walk the extra 12 minutes? These micro decisions consume genuine mental energy because every dollar feels scarce and precious. Every choice feels like it could tip the balance. After the threshold, something changes. Not because the small purchases become irrelevant, but because you develop a clearer intuition about where the real leverage in your finances actually lives. The difference between buying a $4 coffee every day versus making it at home is approximately $1,000 per year if you are genuinely relentless about it. Real money, but not transformative money. Not the kind of decision that determines whether you retire at 55 or 60. What determines that are the big decisions: where you live, what you drive, how aggressively you invest, whether you maximize tax-advantaged accounts, how much of each raise you redirect before it reaches your checking account. These choices move your net worth by tens of thousands of dollars over time. They are the actual levers. People who have crossed the $20,000 threshold tend to stop agonizing over the organic bananas and start paying much closer attention to their housing costs, their investment allocation, their career trajectory. Not because they decided to be more strategic, because their experience with compounding money taught them intuitively where the real decisions live. This is one of the more liberating aspects of reaching the threshold. The mental energy previously consumed by small purchase anxiety gets redirected toward the questions that actually matter. You become a better financial decision maker, not because you became more disciplined, but because you are now spending your attention on the choices where attention produces results. The feedback loop that accelerates everything here is the dynamic that most people underestimate because they have not experienced it yet. Reaching $20,000 through discipline produces a psychological shift. That psychological shift produces better career decisions. Better career decisions produce higher income. Higher income funds faster savings. Faster savings compound into higher returns. Higher returns reach the next threshold sooner. Each threshold unlocks new options. New options create more opportunity. More opportunity accelerates everything. This is not a theory. It is the mechanical description of how most real wealth accumulation happens. The first threshold is the hardest, the slowest, and the one that produces the least visible momentum. Almost every person who successfully builds significant wealth has a story about a time early in the process when they almost stopped, when the progress felt invisible, when the discipline felt pointless, when the distance to meaningful results felt too large to justify the sacrifice. The people who continued through that phase eventually experienced the feedback loop. The people who stopped mostly never did. The threshold was always the same distance away. The difference was staying in motion long enough to reach it. $20,000 is not special as a number. It is a reasonable approximation of the point where three things converge simultaneously: a financial buffer large enough to eliminate survival mode thinking, a savings habit established enough to have become partly automatic, and a compounding base large enough for returns to begin registering as meaningful amounts. Those three things together produce a different financial life than the one available to someone without them. Not because the world treats them differently, because they interact with the world differently when the pressure of constant financial scarcity has been removed from their decision-making. $20,000 will not make you wealthy on its own. It will not solve every financial problem. It will not produce the life you are trying to build in a single step. What it will do is change the game you are playing. It moves you from survival to strategy, from reactive to proactive, from negotiating from weakness to negotiating from strength, from watching opportunities pass to having the capacity to act on them, from managing crises to building towards something. Every threshold beyond $20,000 follows the same pattern. Each milestone arrives faster than the previous. Each level unlocks instruments and options unavailable before it. Each acceleration compounds the ones before it, but none of it starts until the first threshold is crossed. The boulder is still at the bottom of the hill. Start pushing. Your future position in this game depends entirely on the decision you make about that today, not someday. Not when things settle down, not when the timing feels right. Today. The pushing starts today.